velocity is fundamental, or maybe distance, depending, So mass, distance, charge, you have a few fundamental dimensions. Each of them have constants that sort of regulate physical behavior. But what is it for the mind? Even if you're a computationalist where supposedly you have precise models, why, what exactly are you measuring? Is it neural activity? Is it, especially if it starts becoming subjective. So for example, whether I like something more than something else. What is this like? And what is the dimension of this like entity? We don't know those things. So there's actually a lot of work to be done there. And you have to ask, and a deep account of the mind, if it turns out that continuous variables are simply wrong. So that all our accounts of the mind have to be what are called ordinal variables rather than cardinal ones. So which is to say, I like something more than something else, but I can't tell you exactly how much more. Not 7% or 18% or something like that. So it goes back to our tall and taller yesterday. Taller is precise, tall is not. So it's an ordinal variable. So if we were to make a science of the mind, we need therefore a theory of measurement that underlies it. No science has ever gotten very far without a solid basis in what is it that it is measuring. So these are questions which become more and more important now because we have to aggregate huge data sets and come up with good analysis. And so those challenges are new, exciting. We hope to do some of the work at NIAS itself, not just for cognition but for other questions as well. So given that fact, we are going to have Professor Seshu come tomorrow and talk the second session. He more or less confirmed it with me yesterday. He was going to talk next Wednesday, but that's not going to happen. So hopefully everything will go through and he'll be giving us his insights on the matter. And those of you who are computationally able or at least interested should pay attention. I mean, he himself is not a cognitive scientist, so he won't be able to tell us how to link the kind of supercomputing-based work that they are doing, let's say, for fluid mechanics, with the kind of problems that cognitive scientists face. So you should be figuring that out in your head, right? Assuming that you can do both. Okay, so that's the logistical part of the world. Now we move to the intellectual part again. As I said yesterday, this is sort of a soft, slow thinking session. And one of the things that I have been focusing on the last 2 days is this notion of embodiment and embodied cognition. But what is this body in the embodied cognition? Already today I mentioned two very different ideas of the body. If you are paying attention. One idea which comes from the cognitive linguists is this idea that the higher level concepts, or whatever, the more abstract concepts like justice, are grounded in lower level concepts, which in turn are eventually grounded in bodily entities like space. Okay, so that was one idea of the body, that somehow we derive our understanding of emotion or of social relations or of justice from pre-conceptual intuitions of how space works. Okay, so that's one direction. It's a non-dynamic, right? Because it's still geometric to some extent in the way that Mars' theory of vision was geometric. Meaning, you're not really thinking of space as a dynamic entity there. It's a the most common metaphor that's used is the container schema. Right? So it's a container view of the mind. But there's another view that we saw in the second session, which is that the body as the actor, so the ambulatory view of the body, which is that we don't have a static body. So even the abstraction that you have this coordinatized body which is like this, right? So this abstracted picture of a single person who is standing with hands and legs straight itself is not really the actual state of affairs. We never have a still body except when you are sleeping, right? And in fact, a very interesting analysis of sleep and dreams itself can be done from an embodied cognition perspective, because you could argue that besides that dreaming, again, a fantastic research project to be done by someone who wants to do it, which is, what is an embodied account of dreaming? And it's the one time in your daily life cycle where you are actually not moving, or at least you're not moving that much. So relative to all other activities, dreaming is based on a static body. And if you remember what I said, which is the visual experience is tied to moving. Yeah.
I think even while dreaming, eyes.
Sure, there is that. So there is that REM sleep has eye movements, but compared to what your body does during the waking hours, where not only the eye movements are also, those are not saccadic eye movements, right? Because saccadic eye movements have targets. So I go from fixing on this thing to that thing. Those tend to be more oscillatory eye movements. But which is why it becomes interesting, which is that when you shut off, so to speak, the plug that connects the body to the world, you get very different kinds of experience. Right? It's not like we don't, I mean, we do experience the world visually and auditorily in the dream space. But clearly, whatever theory of embodiment can explain dreaming, it can't be based on the Gibsonian idea that you have to move to be able to see, because we're not moving, at least right now. So, one therefore question would be, is the special character of dreaming? So dreams are not that coherent, right? I mean, if you pay attention to your dreams, you will realize that you're dreaming on things, suddenly something else comes, and so on. So one, therefore, obvious question would be, is a representationalist or a classical kind of new computational neuroscientist would say that dreaming is just the output of some neural firing patterns. But an embodied theorist might be able to come up with some very interesting analyses of how the fractured or otherwise incomplete nature of dreaming is partly due to the very way your body is structured during the dream state. Right? So you're completely flipping the explanation of dreaming. What do I mean by that? The normal explanation of dreaming is that it's the one thing that is 100% subjective. Because the world is completely absent, so you are living completely in the world of your own subjective experience. That's the claim. So you could totally flip that and say that no, dreaming is the place where the static nature of the body is the single biggest influence on why you dream the way you dream. If somebody could pull that off, it would be great. And so it tells you that just as computation can help you analyze almost anything, just like, embodiment should also help us analyze anything. So you should be able to at least come up with interesting hypotheses that say, no, dreaming is this way rather than that way. Not because this part of the brain is awake and that part of the brain is not, but rather because your body is still versus it is in motion. So already that tells you therefore that different ideas of the body and its relationship to experience will help us at least come up with alternate explanations in several situations. Now, that still doesn't mean that we understand what the body is. Is the body this moving thing? Is the body the still thing that sleeps? Is the body that stuff which is on the operating table when you're being operating? I mean, is it just the physical stuff? How do you know that they are the same body? I mean, we just assume that body is a univalent entity, right? That there is one thing called body in which all of these different concepts somehow just merge together. But just as we don't think that the brain is some